Hi there, and welcome to week 4, part 1. Let's get started. On slide 2, you see we'll first start talking about the efforts to establish the People's Republic from 1949 to 1955. Going on to slide 2, this is a review of a key slide from last time that brings us into this period. Mao decided to lean to one side, that is to favor relations with the Soviet Union, and publicly announced this in 1949 after the establishment of the People's Republic in October. He traveled to Moscow to meet with Stalin. And as you can see in this picture, the two of them were very happy to see each other. They negotiated a mutual assistance treaty, which turned out to be important because of the upcoming Korean War, which Mao probably did not predict at this point. Although Kim Il-sung was talking about the invasion, he probably did not necessarily anticipate needing to intervene on Korea's side. But Stalin probably knew more about the subject, because he had thoroughly, not really infiltrated, he had set up the North Korean regime. He probably had a number of people on the inside who were telling him what was going on in the planning. On the other hand, he also probably thought it would be a walkover. And as well, we went over, which we'll elaborate on a little bit this time, why Mao was able to establish a reputation in the course of the revolution that made him the undisputed leader, and what that meant for the period of his rule of China between 1949 and 1976. Let's go on to slide 4. In 1949 and 1950, the most powerful organization in the country was the People's Liberation Army, the PLA. And they were the vehicle by which the party ruled the country until about 1954. Control was exerted through the military regions. These military regions, now there were only 6 at that point. This more modern rendition shows us 7 military regions. They're basically the same in East China, except that the Chengdu military region you see there didn't exist because Tibet hadn't been taken over in 1949. And in 1950, and the Tibet military region was not, or really a military district, which is below a region, was not created until 1952. But anyway, the important part is that the military had the ability to transport people and things. They had the ability to communicate by radio, which was much more extensive than what were the underground organizations under the organization department of the party, under the propaganda department, had in place at the time. In other words, of course, the military had invaded all these places, had taken them all over, had military units in place with communications departments in each division and so forth. So that meant that they were in a better position to spread party instructions from the top. They were in a better position to bring people from one place to another. In other words, they were the indispensable element that allowed the party to rule China during this early period. They became important again during the Cultural Revolution because, as we'll learn, Mao overthrew the party at the local level by using Red Guards, and by making personnel changes where Red Guards weren't used in the few instances where that happened. And when he decided to rein in the Red Guards, and because of the chaos that had resulted, he used the military to do that and to administer the country in some ways similar to the way it was administered right after the revolution, using what were called revolutionary committees that were made up of party, government, and military people, but which were run by the military. But we'll get into that in a couple weeks. Going on to slide 5. This is something that is often difficult to explain unless you've studied it for a long time. So I've tried to really make it as plain and simple as I can. And that is this interlocking directorate, as some people like to call it, the use of the party, government, and military to run things in China. This model I've drawn, which again is very simple, is meant to represent how things were in the first couple decades of the PRC, especially during this period we're speaking of. At the very top is the Politburo Standing Committee. That's the party side. And what I've got here, I've got the party organizations on the left and the government and military organizations on the right. And you can see 3 levels here, 3 very basic levels. The very top of the government, along with then the second level is also the central government, but not the ruling elite, the very top of the party and government. And then the third level gets down to the provinces and cities. So starting at the top, under the party, at the left there, the Politburo Standing Committee. At the time that we're speaking of now, there were only 5 members. There were 9 members up until the last party congress, and now there are 7. This has gone up and down through history depending on the needs of the political leadership at the moment. So these are the people who meet day to day and make all the major decisions. They're a bit like a cabinet, but these are people at the political level, the very top, each of whom has a portfolio to handle a number of areas of government. Now on the right, I've listed PRC President and Premier, and these are government offices, but they're held by people who are on the Politburo Standing Committee, almost without exception through PRC history. And whoever is in charge of the Central Military Commission, also ostensibly a government body under the Ministry of National Defense, right? Whoever's head of the Central Military Commission, or the CMC, is also a member of the Politburo Standing Committee. So both of these government and military areas of portfolio, areas of office, interlock because the same people are in the offices and the positions at this top level. Then comes the Politburo. The Politburo is larger. Right now, I think it has 19 people. Or no, it has 20-some-odd people now. I've forgotten the exact number. At the time we're talking about, there were 19. And on the right, the government side, vice premiers and key CMC members, maybe all of them, would be at this level, and they, almost without exception, would be members of the Politburo, the larger elite ruling group. The vice premiers, what on earth are they? The vice premiers are responsible for a number of functional areas. For example, back in the 1990s, there was a man named Zhou Jiahua, whom I studied because of my job when I was stationed in China at the time. He was the vice premier who was in charge of all of the technology issues, everything regarding technology. So he had a number of ministers who headed government departments who reported to him. The Ministry of Machine Building, the Ministry of Telecommunications and Posts reported to him, the Ministry of Electronics reported to him, and there were a couple others. And whatever key commissions that are formed for special tasks would come under him. So that the same is true. There'd be a vice minister in charge, or rather a vice premier in charge of agriculture and trade and different areas like that. There'll be a vice minister, a vice premier, who's in charge of all the security stuff, the Ministry of Public Security, the Ministry of State Security, the law apparatus, and so on. So that's how that works. So again, between the Politburo and these people on the right, the vice premiers, there'll be perhaps 4 of them who supervise the entire government, and the Central Military Commission senior members, they'll all interlock. They'll be the same people. Then you go down to the Central Committee level. The Central Committee, if you recall from before, is the body that meets every few years. When there's trouble of one sort or another, if there's political instability, then the Central Committee won't be meeting because political instability tends to cause disagreement, which leads to an inability to come to a consensus on when key meetings like a Central Committee meeting should be held. And there are about 300 people on the Central Committee. I'm afraid I don't have that number, but it's not particularly vital to understand the situation. And then on the right, on the government side, people who are in the Central Committee will also be these people. Ministers of the ministries, like the Ministry of Public Security or the Ministry of Agriculture or the Ministry of Education, governors of the provinces, mayors of the large cities like Chongqing, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, important military commanders, army commanders, military region commanders, for example, will inevitably be seated on the Central Committee, and also senior people in the National People's Congress, the other large representative body on the government side, just like the Central Committee is the large representative body on the party side. So this is how the party runs China and how it ran China back then, with a collection of people at each level who have both party and government responsibilities. And I emphasize, of course, that whoever was the decision maker for a particular issue on the party side was the one who was really in charge. They weren't always the same people, but often they were. Let's go on now to slide 6. So once the revolution was over, there was a very major reorganization of the police and intelligence apparatus. I remember talking last time about how the bad boy of Chinese Communist history, the worst bad boy of all, Kang Sheng, who was in charge of the CCP intelligence apparatus, which was called the Central Social Department, often called the Social Affairs Department. He had, at Mao's behest, he had run a massive purge of the party in 1942 to 44, the crazy period of which was in 1943. People were tortured, a few were killed. It was nothing on the scale of Stalin's purges, but it was pretty intense. So everybody hated his guts, and in 1950, this man Li Kanong here took 6 months with a group of people and wrote a history of everything that had happened in his area of responsibility. And and that study is still unfortunately secret. One of those conclusions, though, that's made it out into the open literature was that the intelligence apparatus should never again act as if it were like a Russian secret police, or so the story goes. So Mao decided to separate the intelligence people from that. They had a limited domestic mission after that, although it grew after his death due to the way things were reorganized. And he split it up, partly to keep people happy and to, I suspect, to make them believe that there would absolutely be no more terrible purges of the party, a la Stalin, which was going on at the time. It was very well known and continued until the time Stalin died. And he split it up between the party and the military and the government, but he put Lee Kanong in charge of everything. And then in 1955, after the Korean War was over with, Lee was promoted to marshal for his service. That's like the top military rank that you can have in Russia or China, and he consolidated these services into the investigations department, which remained unknown for many years. It was only in the 1960s that somebody defected and to the United States and let them know of the existence of this department. On the police side, the Ministry of Public Security was formed under a former general who was actually brought in by Mao and told, you are now going to be running the Ministry of Public Security. He wanted to continue with his military duties and go on to liberate Sichuan, where he was from, in the southwest. But Mao said, no, you're going to do this, and there was a brand new ministry that had been formed by splitting up the social affairs department and by taking them and combining them with the police, so that they would do both regular policing on a national level and counterintelligence against Kuomintang spies left over and against people they considered to be nasty individuals through society. The Ministry of Public Security supervised mass organizations, including residence committees, committees made up of people whose sole job was to keep an eye on their neighborhood and make reports to the local police station. This brought surveillance to the household level, and indeed it was more intense, arguably, than anything that had been implemented in Chinese history. And that surveillance system remains to this day. It's not precisely the same as it was in the 1950s, but it still exists, and the party still maintains it with their own effort and through the Ministry of Public Security to keep an eye on every single little thing that goes on in a neighborhood or a housing complex. These surveillance committees were used during the high tide of the birth control campaign, the one-child policy that is dying out now, to enforce that. If a woman missed her period in an apartment house, then it would be the job of the neighborhood committee, basically under the Ministry of Public Security, to find out about it and report that to the party, upper party committee, which would, if necessary, call in the police in order to enforce it. Quite a system. They also ran secret police functions, not only to investigate party members for misconduct or spying, but also to spy on society. Now, if you've seen the very interesting and very worthwhile movie from Germany called The Lives of Others, Die Leben des Anderen, I think it is in German, Die Leben des Anderen, or Der Leben des Anderen, The Lives of Others. It shows how the East German secret police penetrated the lowest levels of society with their spies that they recruited from all walks of life. And a new study that has just come out by the Swedish scholar Michael Schoenhals indicates that the Chinese were not in second place when it came to this sort of effort. His study, what's it called? Spying for Mao or something like that. His study indicates, spying for the people, that's what it is. Spying for the people. If you happen to, I'll take the tea bag off the thing. Here we go. There it is. Spying for the people, Mao's secret agents. Notice how I'm hiding behind the book. Maintain my confidentiality. Schoenhals. Pretty cool book so far. So anyway, his research, which is new and which hasn't really stirred up any dust yet, but I'm sure it will, indicates that that the Chinese Communist Party did quite a job of infiltrating society down to the lowest level, so that the authorities always knew what was going on practically everywhere. Rather an amazing system, and one that should not be underestimated in the effect that it had on society as people became afraid to even speak to their own children. We'll stop this recording here and go on to slide number 7. We'll go from 6 to 7.